because now we're going to have a panel, the future of the sector and life cycle assessment in the industry, in the leather industry. Please send to us your questions to be answered here live through the QR code that you can find in your program. And I also call to the stage the moderator of this conversation, Ricardo Andrade, who is the sustainability consultant for CICB, and I also call the panelists Otávio Klein, executive manager of Minerva Leather, Elena Barone, head of the consultancy Spin 360, and Kim Sena, director or sustainability officer at JBS Chorus. Also with us, Michael Costello, who already gave his presentation. Okay, so to continue with our program, we're going to have a debate now, and the idea is to explore a little bit of what was presented here and looking towards the future. What we have today was demonstrated everything that our industry has been done and our suppliers, our partners, and now we want to understand better, looking ahead, where we expect to reach and how we believe that this can be done. So I will start here with a question that was asked to Elena. So Elena, the term sustainability has three main pillars: the environmental, economic, and social. Facing or considering the talks that were given, we were able to see the development of the environmental pillar, like climate change and the qualification of tons of emissions by ton and square meters of product. But regarding the LCA social and economic, you in SPIN, a consultancy with a global view of LCA, do you see the need, and is the market wanting to understand about these two other pillars as well? If so, will it reach the industry of cattle raising and leather, or are other markets that are demanding the quantification of the social and economic impacts?
Yeah. Elena, it's better to take out now.
Yeah, sorry, Ricardo. I had a problem with the headphones, so I didn't hear the question well. Maybe if I got it right, it's about economic and environmental sustainability on the upstream.
Sí.
Okay. So some of us, please tell me then if I answered well, because half of the question was not there for me. So some of us think that environmental and economic variables don't go in the same direction. So for some actors, it is thought that if I improve the environmental performance, that I will increase the cost, or in the short term. In the short term, it could be right, but I can go and serve different markets, and so I'll also ensure I will supply my product to the client. Second, potentially in the future, I can increase the revenues because I can differentiate from different actors in the supply chain because I'm doing something special. Then, if the question was referred to the example I was doing of the $2 as an incentive, right? Was that? Thanks. So, just to recall the examples I've given before, the idea was, let's collaborate upstream with the farmers and understand first how they raise cattle today, what they do, what is a good practice and what is a bad practice in raising cattle. And second, understanding if some even economic incentives can help us reduce that big 65% of impact that comes from the upstream we have seen before. So we can discover that a small economic incentive can reduce the environmental impact way more than how much it costs to me, that incentive itself. That's one point, something I'm confident we can find out. Something else is opportunity for circular economy between industries. So some tannins are already used today as animal feeds to reduce methane of cattle. So tannins are something we in the leather industry use for something else, but has already been proved as it is an additive feed to reduce methane emission. This could be one example for the feeding that decreases the impact of the upstream and potentially is linked with the tanning industry.
Thank you, Elena. Now I'm going to ask a question to Otávio, our colleague that works in one of the largest companies in Brazil, Minerva, and they also are working with an integrated chain from production to slaughterhouse. So my question to Otávio, it's within the topic that I addressed, how the origin of raw material and traceability influence the environmental impacts identified with an LCA. Good afternoon. First, I would like to say a disclaimer here. There are lots of experts here. I'm the only curious one here. I'm only more layperson. I'll give you more a business view and less technical. I won't talk about what's not my area of expertise. But I believe that traceability has a fundamental role in this conception of an LCA. I think the starting point, and using our example, we focused and we have been focusing mainly in traceability for us to know exactly. It is still the main demand for leather. It's the main challenge, and it's where we are able to in fact measure and to have what Kim mentioned in his presentation and also Elena, which are primary data. When we talk about South America, we today use in a large part of the data from GHG protocol or global data, which are secondary data overall and global data, and very often they are worse than the data that we have here in South America. So one advantage, a big advantage that we're going to have when we are able to have better quality and also quantity of primary data, and these data include traceability data, knowing where the calf comes from and downstream of that, is being able to, in a way, to prove and to have an exact measurement of how much or what is the carbon footprint, what is the comparative advantage or not that Brazil and South America could have compared to the other countries, and removing this negative effect that we have today. So traceability from the point of view of advantage to LCA, one of those is obtaining primary data. Very nice. So we have Kim here from JBS. They have been developing lots of works with LCA, and so I would like you to comment about this question. I think you are also working on this perspective of developing LCAs with the properties, the farmers. So what is the experience that you could share? Do you already have some results or information for us to understand as a guideline how much looking to the property, to the producers, how much can this bring in terms of benefits to a life cycle analysis?
This is an interesting question. In our work, chose 10 farms to start with, but these are 10 people that, first of all, what this person will gain with this. Many times they will gain, but their gain will be to understand more about their business, but they're going to have a lot of work because there are a lot of people that will go, not necessarily going, but they have meetings to know how much water you consume, how fast your cattle is growing, what is the weight at the end of life, what's the feed, what's the diet. It's a lot of work. And if you don't have somebody with the will to do that, with goodwill, understanding that there's a value that to deliver to the sector, you have people of low engagement, and the collection data will be bad, sorry. So that's the main challenge. People that really wanted to do the work and that were curious and engaged. Next week, there's a colleague of mine that will travel, going to the farms, where it's a geographic challenge also, to help in the data collection. Sometimes one data is not clear. As we said, everybody said, if you have bad data as an input, you have low quality material as a result. The main challenge is to have the engagement and the openness of people that are not making any more money to do all this work, opening their doors of their farm, understanding the value that that can have for the entire sector. After that, the challenge is to guarantee that the curatorship of the data, to guarantee that the work is well done, so then we can model. So I think that after we surpass the initial engagement barrier, we will have to see what's the next step. More farms, more productive systems, maybe other countries. We must understand that the person on the other side wants to have something from the process. We need to think about this as a strategy. Very nice. Now, I have a question for Michael. In the case of the leather sector, looking at the supply chain, we have a huge challenge of how to obtain this information that you just said. When you go to the farm, sometimes you don't have the information available. He doesn't understand why he will give this information. Looking at the chemical sector, what are the main challenges to obtain data from your suppliers? Is this chain more structured? You can obtain this data in a more structured manner to compose the LCA. How was the chemical industry? They have an important participation in our industry. How do you think the industry is to obtain this information? What is the quality of this information?
Yes, thank you. Probably the chemical industry is more structured because we have many big chemical companies who supply us, and they have data. They give us primary data. However, we also are a very specialized chemical company. So many of the raw materials that we need are coming from smaller, medium-sized, or even small chemical companies. And they do not have data. They do not have the resources to have a sustainability department. Yeah? So from those companies, it's very difficult for us to get the data. So we have to sometimes make estimations, knowing the chemistry, using the database, and having a kind of an averaged number that we use. But the way that we check that is we have a rating system, like a traffic light system for the quality of data. So if we get good primary data with a nice declaration, using the protocol, the greenhouse gas protocol, using the ISO guidelines, then we give that a green, good quality data. If we get data from a customer where the declaration is not very clear, maybe they've used average data, so maybe we give that amber or orange. And if we have no data and we have to go to the database or even make an estimation ourselves, then we give that a red color. So that way, all of our data has a quality label attached to it. So we know then when we give data to a customer, we can tell them if it's good, medium, or bad quality. Yeah?
Ok, obrigado, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Now a question for Otávio. The tanneries have specific demands, they request LCAs. What customer from what industry, what's their size? Yes, this demand is recent. As concrete, it's more recent. It is increasing according to the deadlines that the industry and the government have set to reduce the emissions. So a leather, talking a bit of our perspective, the fashion sector, as was mentioned, a large part of the data you have is from fashion, shoes, luxury accessories. It's an industry that pulls this movement. and they are financing in a manner demanding this from the value chain, helping to contribute with this process. So I think the automotive industry, because it's a more complex industry, Kim's slide showed very well that a part of what the automotive industry is, they have their challenges, and it's not leather, all their materials, to be able to transform this in a demand reality in terms of leather, but also it's a one-way road. I mentioned in the past, in the 1980s, 1990s, we're talking about wastewater treatment, and now this will be a demand, the AWG and all of this. No, we're not talking about this. It's a reality. Either you have it or you're out of business. Traceability is becoming that fast. And to become, if you have a low carbon emission company, having constant, continuous improvement, going to net zero is the next step. Summarized, we have the demand, it's still to become a product, it's still far, but it exists as reduction of scope 3, mitigation, and it's scaling, especially in the fashion industry. And I'm gonna ask Kim, he works in the industry, how do you see this regarding these demands? How we're being demanded and what we're doing to give this answer, to give this response. I'm gonna agree. The fashion sector, those that have brands, big brands, are the first ones. Automotive sector, we work a lot with furniture and automotive. Automotive is ahead of the furniture industry, but we have industries that have leather for furniture that is requesting LCAs. If they're not requesting, when we show that to them, they understand the value of that, so they can communicate to their end customer also. But I think it's clear the sign. It comes in different ways. We have those companies that will request and say, look, do you have the LCA? How much it is? I want to use this information to make qualified decisions in my company. There are others that come with a demand that's more aggressive, saying, I want a leather that gives me 5 kilos of CO2 per square meter. Do you have that? And I have to say, I don't. Let's go. So it's not an easy answer. So some people come anxious, wanting a shelf-ready answer, and some people want to know their value chain, map out, engage. The example that Michael gave us that they use to map the vendors. There are companies that do this, and others already are ahead and already want to know who has less, like a bidding process, which is dangerous. We risk using the LCA in a bad way because it becomes a race who has the smallest number. This is not healthy at the end of the day. In this process, you can have many pitfalls. We have several levels of maturity, and it's up to first the sustainability department and sales working together to guarantee that you have a quality answer. Perfect. So, enjoying, Elena, with the experience that you have with your work in several countries, how to you, what are the challenges to obtain the data? We know in Brazil, up to some extent, you can. Production data, as you showed, it's complicated. But looking at a global experience where you're working in other markets, Europe, US, what are the challenges to obtain this information?
Thanks for the question. It's very interesting. One challenge is the same Kim was mentioning before, having people engaged, having people understanding why they're asking as many questions. So, of course, at the beginning, doing the LCAs requires some effort. So, mapping the process, every phase, and writing down the recipes. There. One example I was mentioning before was the example of a tannery where all the recipes are inside the mind of the technical manager. There, it's very hard to collect the data, of course. In some other cases, we have structured tanneries, which are full industries. All the data, all the lot has a specific measurement, so all the data are already there. We are not talking about crazy data that do not exist. We are talking about material flow. Productivity is something that every business shall measure. What is the ratio between output and input, right? So we're not talking about something too weird. The point is to understand where it is. So in our different experiences, we find different level of maturity, where the processes are automized or digitalized at least. It's easier for us to collect the information. Where it is not, even some tanneries don't have, at least the one I visited in Europe, some don't have a water counter. So how do they dose the water? The weight, the time for it to flow. So, you know, it's crazy. I mean, I'm just going with some strange examples. That's not the normality, but you can imagine how hard it is for them to measure water dosage in a recipe if they don't have a counter, right? So, same, of course, for the energy. And another key point that was mentioned by Mike before is the data quality. We can measure, for example, energy consumption in different ways. Either we start from the department and then we make some assumption, or we have an energy counter at every machine. There, you imagine the data quality of the output, the LCA is different. Of course, every data point we collect, we are checking what is the data quality so that the output of the LCAs can range according to how good the data input was.
Thank you. One last question for Michael. As you said, Michael, the chemical industry is more organized. That you said that many times you anticipate actions, anticipate the market movement. Looking forward in a world that more and more the legislation will be more strict, there will be a higher attention regarding the impact, emissions, how the chemical industry is working in this perspective. How are you preparing yourselves? What are you doing to be able to be ahead of what the market will demand?
Yeah, you're referring specifically to LCA data, correct? Yeah. So what the industry is doing is transforming from a mostly manual collection of data to a more automated collection and calculation of the data. So this requires an investment in systems, in software. It also requires the help of experts in the industry like Spin 360. But what we're doing is we're internalizing some of the automation of data by buying, it's expensive, but we're buying calculation tools that can help us process the data. Yeah? So the vision in the future, our vision is a little bit like restricted substances 10 years ago, when if we got a request from our customers for the presence of certain restricted substances in our products, we found a way to automatically produce a declaration that gives the information to the customer within 1 or 2 days, all the data on the restricted substances. So our vision for LCA data is when we get a request from our customer, what is the LCA of these products? We can put the products into this new system that we're developing, and within a few hours, we get a declaration out, which gives them all of the information. We're not there yet. Yeah? It's still a little bit manual. But I believe the chemical industry in 5 years, or maybe 10, will normalize this type of process of data. in the same way that we have normalized declarations for ZDHC, REACH, etc. So I think also third-party certification of LCA data is also coming in the future, in the same way that it happened with restricted substances. So in 5 or 10 years, there will be a great opportunity for third-party certifiers of LCA data. So I think that also is coming for the chemical industry.
Thank you so much, Michael. A question for Kim. In Brazil, if you want to do an LCA, where do you start? The question is for Kim. Where do you start the process when you want to work with this and understand? What suggestions do you give of how this work can be done? I reinforce the guide that I have mentioned in my talk. Those that didn't scan the QR code, look in the internet life cycle assessment guide, or I'll send you the link. You ask, get in contact and I'll send you the link. Everything is prepared. It's 8 pages, and you have a guide, a generic guide to start. With this, seeking partners like Spin 360 and others in the market that you like, but it's a huge mission. Start alone, to start alone. Something that's well established, the methodology, like an LCA. So to do a first one with a partner, like it or not, it's a way to reduce your learning curve and start, and then you do your own path after that. Very nice. It's a journey, hard journey, challenging journey, and to have the support is very important. I'm gonna ask a question to all of you, so you can all give your answers. What are the future trends to reduce the environmental impact in the leather chain based on the LCA studies? Let's start with Elena.
Thank you. Such a nice question. So I just wrap up something maybe I tried to express before. One, I'd say, of course, we mentioned traceability and collecting data upstream. This is not new. Of course, we have already seen a lot of effort put in place. One key point is making different sectors collaborate, I would say. Sometimes in Europe, we find, I mean, I talk about European example because are the one I know better. Sometimes we find that the information we ask for to the food industry or to the dairy milk industry are already, to the leather are already there in the food and dairy industry. So it's about making different actors talk together and share information. The other one we are working already on, and I think is going to come more in the coming years, is about durability, of course. Kim mentioned in his presentation the idea of broadening the system boundaries, so not only focusing on a material up to the tannery gate, but see it on the finished product and see how a finished product is more durable than another. And this can help really differentiate leather from other PU-based material or fossil-based material, because the durability should not be the same. So if we focus on the day of use of a product, for example, is something which is not, we are not doing it already. We are working to set up the measurement guidelines to do so, to measure durability, both functional and emotional. So durability and expanding the system boundaries is very key. I think in the future we will also go to the end of life and we will assess how disassemblable products are. We're not producing materials or product to put them on the market and forget about it and stop having problems. These products are going to become trash, whether we like it or not, in the future. So if in the coming years, not that far, we will think about eco-design, so thinking on how hard it is to recover materials, components, or products to reduce the environmental impact, to enlarge lifespan.
I think that there's a first step, which is with the LCA, we can have a better prioritization of where, in fact, is the effort that should be taken. We are seeing organizations with limitations of resources or talents, human resources or time, whatever, and very often wasting this in actions that won't be so effective. So we saw here the two focal points, and maybe it's not clear to everyone how much raw material represents and how much tanning or retanning process represents of the, in our case, for example, to give you a quick example, reaching up to the slaughterhouse and the green leather, 96% of our emissions are on the farm. So we have 4%, which is scope 3, so 4% in scopes 1 and 2. So our effort is not, I don't mean that it's not important, but our efforts should not be allocated into putting up solar panels or electric cars in slaughterhouses. That's not what will solve it. So the future of LCA is giving more visibility to the priorities of where action should be taken and where we are going to gain more reduction of emissions. And in the case of our industry, it is in fact to increase the size of the pie. I think today we are at a point where the leather, it is not at the level that it is due to price as in the past, because leather is too expensive and it loses demand. I'm not talking about negotiations or specific products, but in general today, if leather were able to reach the market share that it does not reach due to problems related to, let's say, sustainability in general, we would already place leather into a different level. And in speaking about South American leather, if it didn't have the restrictions that it has or that it suffers in the world due to problems related, again, quote-unquote sustainability, we would also already be in a different level in terms of product and industry. So I think that the future, as they said, is automating data, having better data, having conditions to position our sector, our companies with a branding, in fact, in a different level, helping to improve the size of the pie of the leather market and of beef as well in our case.
Yes, I think there's two things from the chemical perspective. In the near term, the best way we can reduce the impact of the chemicals is simplification. So simplification, what that means is for the chemicals that the industry uses, what we have found in our hotspot analysis is that the more sophisticated is the chemical, then the higher is the impact. So a very highly specialized polymer, silicone or polyurethane, or with a lot of steps in the process, that has the highest impact. So if we can find ways to provide the same properties with something that's more simpler, then we need to do that. Secondly, the simplification of the chemical formulations that the tanneries use. If we can help to reduce the number of chemicals, instead of having 50 different auxiliary chemicals and polymers and all sorts of things, if we can simplify that formulation, that nearly always means a lower impact, because usually then you can reduce the water usage and the energy at the tannery. So that simplification is clear. That's in the near term what we can do. In the long term, we have to find a way to replace fossil-based chemicals with something that's lower carbon, typically bio-based chemicals. And that is a real challenge, because the bigger, wider chemical industry has not yet scaled up the bio-based chemical replacements. So that's the long-term challenge.
Thank you, Kim. Now, I would go back to that division that we have, which is our strategic guideline in kind leather. First is reducing environmental impact of raw materials for leather, especially hides specifically. And here it means supporting more sustainable practices, producing or livestock raising practices. And here it's important to highlight the role of traceability, because nobody does traceability because they want or because it's fun, but because they are seeking something to implement a system, a very dense system of traceability in our company. In our case, with traceability, we are able to especially to separate, I think in the future, when we have a system, a national traceability system, to separate different production systems. I mean, from where that animal came, that is going to make a difference to your LCA, to the environmental impact of your material in the end of the day. And a big challenge that we have as a country is to be able to separate deforestation from the production chain, to disconnect, because we know that that's an exception. It's a few people, criminals, who are practicing deforestation, but without traceability, because you don't have the capability to separate one animal from the other, at the end of the day, you have this large number or calculation of deforestation that still exists in Brazil is spread to all the hides. So this ends up being a burden to the sector. So having traceability, we would be able to promote more sustainable practices, but also we'll be able to separate one from the other. In addition, is about raw material, is having more sustainable chemicals and less chemicals. Don't be angry with me, but less chemicals, but maybe more expensive chemicals. I don't know. I'm not responsible for buying them, so. And third, it's maximizing the production and respecting this area of leather, because at the end of the day, we see when you industrialize the whole or leather, everything that you generate of cuts and wastes in the process, it is on the account of leather. So if you could do this in the beginning of the process when it's still a hide, this will make a difference. So those are the three pillars: raw material, cattle hide or bovine hide, chemicals, and maximization of co-production. I think it's important to highlight what you said. We talk about this link between what would be the animal, the raw material, linked to deforestation. So I would like to remember that in Brazil, 98% of the deforestation is illegal. So very often, due to this 2%, it ends up that this calculation becomes expensive, because the issue of the incorrect use of the land, it ends up being into the average of Brazil. But we have some discussions in Brazil nowadays that are recognized both in Brazil and abroad. Like, for example, Embrapa is an institution that has been working in this perspective of supplying data regarding the production systems, the different types of production systems. And each system will deliver an animal or a raw material with a specific impact regarding emissions. So we believe in Brazil that science has advanced a lot, and that now, even due to the impact of the COP and works that are being done in Brazil, we will be able to have a database that will be very important related to the types of production systems and each impact that these production systems could bring to the composition of that LCA or the assessment that you are doing. So I agree with you. I think this is very important. Very often when we talk about LCA in Brazil, this question always comes up. Are you going to use the average? What you're going to use? I say, well, you need to know where you're buying from, because you could be buying from an ecosystem of production and supply that there's no relation or no type of non-compliance regarding this deforestation, and certainly this production system could provide you a raw material with lower emissions. So I think this is an interesting point. And now, more to reach the end, it's a final question. I think it's more to Otávio and Kim, because the companies that you work with operate in other countries as well. So just for us to understand, in other countries, how it's functioning, if you have this in other countries, if it's advanced, if it's a discussion that is happening, if the clients are also demanding LCA in their operations in Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina, Colombia, and so many others, United States, just for us to understand if this is aligned with what is being demanded in the Brazilian industry. Okay, so from our side, I think Brazil, without a doubt, is a focal point in terms of leather, and it has more. It's a more sensitive point due to the Amazon and everything that was built around these narratives. I won't make judgment of value here if they're right or wrong, but Brazil has this focal point. In our case, what we seek and what we have been working on is that because our client very often buys from different origins, we have been doing some work this year. We are launching our own LCA. We started, Kim mentioned, in partnership. We did two, one in 2019 and another in 24, in partnership so that we could reach the end product, the end leather that we don't operate. But this year we are going to do our own from cradle to gate, and we have been working on this in all countries. First, of course, will be in Brazil, and then we're going to scale to the other 4 countries where we operate in South America. We have, and then there are advantages and disadvantages. We have, in Uruguay is more advanced in traceability and or the biome where it's located. In Paraguay, they have the traceability system is advancing quickly, but no one has the complexity that Brazil has due to the size, due to the different production systems, the different biomes, and the importance. So Brazil is, in fact, more demanded. And then I will let Kim talk about the United States and maybe Australia, but I'm speaking about South America, where we operate. We must try to demystify or move away this idea that Brazil is the focal point and the others are not. So for this, we're even going to compare the results of each country and each production system to offer different, now talking about the commercial side, to offer different options and production systems and different results to different markets and clients. I just noticed that I should be looking to the audience. I think that yes, even due to the volume of our business, but we end up receiving more questions from Brazil. But I feel that the LCA demands are more to compare leather with non-leather. Our clients, they are using them to compare materials, and then there's an opportunity and a danger. But that's why I highlight that it's something from the sector. It's a challenge for the sector, because what we see is that when our clients, they take our LCA, the next question is, well, but the number is higher than the synthetic one, or could it be smaller than the synthetic in the future? Or that's interesting, it's already lower than the synthetic. So I feel that this is coming not so much related to geography, but yes, for some who work only with leather, they could be comparing geographies. But I think it's more this interest in comparing leather with non-leather. Perfect. And since with Elena and Michael and your international experience, do you know if there's some market that stands out in terms of demands and working with LCA data that you work with that could be relevant to have a reference?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So, of course, we serve different markets, and in all of them we see the luxury niche a bit ahead than the premium or mass market in the way they ask demands, in the way they ask new things, and they use data also. This is general in fashion, automotive, and all the other sectors we are serving. This is what we normally see. Fashion industry started asking data about traceability or life cycle assessment a bit before, I would say, and even not only on one environmental category, climate change, but also on others. This is something I noticed. And what I mentioned before, durability, we're already working with some of the fashion luxury brands on that. So I would say generic on every market. The luxury is asking something before the others. Same for the automotive industry. We worked with some automotive manufacturer in the luxury, Italian luxury car makers, let's say, and they already not only ask LCAs to their suppliers, but they also kind of set up a competition with a prize based on environmental impact reduction. This is a real case study we have experience with them. So it's not a nice, I mean, LCA started being a nice to have, and I think it's going to become being a must-have, of course, with a third-party revision, and also to link to the regulation. We were mentioning in some of the presentation, the Green Claim Directive, at least in Europe, will state we can no longer talk about sustainable anything unless we bring data. So there is not going to be a green claim without an impact measurement revised by a third party. So this is something that makes me hope for well.
Yes, we also see that the luxury leather brands and the sports shoe brands have invested a lot in sustainability departments, in people. So these are the markets where we see the most demand for LCA data, but also for anything to do with sustainability, whether it's biodiversity, restricted substances, or LCA data. The sports shoes and the luxury brands seem to be where the most activity is. Yeah. More than auto.
Thank you. Okay, Michael, we have another question to you. In the concept of use of raw material from renewable sources and chemicals to reduce their environmental impact and to make them more sustainable, it is considered the use of raw materials, bio-based raw materials, or cultivation areas that could be destined to production of food and they end up being destined to chemical specialties. How this evaluates influences the evaluation of renewable resources in comparison with the use of subproducts in the production chain of fossil fuels?
Yes, a very good question, because it's a common question. But the amount of biochemicals that would be used in our industry, if the industry converted to bio-based chemicals, the percentage of that would be about 0.01% of the total food capacity. So the arable land and the food consumption of the planet, a percentage of that used for bio-based chemicals would be about 0.01%. So it's tiny. I mean, 30% of the food that we use in our houses is wasted. Maybe 20% of the food that comes from the arable land in the world is also wasted. So there's much more opportunity there to improve food yield than the tiny 0.01% that is represented by bio-based chemistry.
Great. And a question to Kim now. Question for Kim. What is the re-tanning line with less CO2? Resin, acrylic, or the re-tanning, or others? The comparison we've made up to now were more comparing how different pre-tanning systems and tanning systems impacted and the total impact of chemicals. And we brought the lens to the re-tanning in itself. I can share what gave us less impact. I would tell you what gave you more The objective is not saying this is the villain, this is the angel, but more thinking, make critical questions about the process. What we saw, yes, tanned chrome tan, leather, independent of the tanning, less impact. It has less impact. Since we compare brother products, which makes sense, if I compare shoe leather with furniture that's super soft, it doesn't make sense. Different application leathers, we don't compare. So different technologies, we don't compare very much. But what we did, yes, is methods of tannering and pre-tanning, low and less impact. Less impact is chrome up to now, but carbon equivalent emissions. But we're very excited that we see the reality can change. What was bringing weight to the other technologies, the alternative technologies, is the retanning. Sometimes what they saved in Ribeira in retanning, they ended up using a lot of chemicals to offset. So this can change in the future with the new products that come. We're getting to the end here. We have a few questions. I ask you, those that have questions, please send them to us. We will evaluate the questions. We're going to answer the questions. You can continue to send the questions even after the event. We from CICB, we are open to help the tanneries, the companies, if they want to start the journey. Count on us with support, guidance with the journey to start the work of the ACV. I want to thank all the members of the panel for the session. Thank everyone in the audience for being with us until now. Thank you so much.